Okay, I'm recording now. We've got almost 3 minutes after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Kimberly could not be here today. She had a meeting conflict, or she's out of state, I think might be the case. And Bruce is under the weather, so it's up to me to run the meeting today. On the screen is the agenda, but the first thing I'm going to do with all of this new power I have as the person running the meeting is rearrange the agenda to put the presentation first so that Intrado can give us their presentation. Just a little preface on what this is. Intrado has been asked to show us the path that would take us from the ESInet as it exists today, that all of the PSAPs have migrated to, closer to a true NINA i3 solution. With all of the functional elements that are included in a NINA i3 solution. And so that's what Intrado is going to be presenting on today. And we have Rich Johnston from Intrado on the line. So Rich, I'm going to stop presenting my screen and let you present yours and take it away.
Great. I will pull that up. Hold, please.
And I don't know if it's possible if you get a little closer to your mic or something. You're a little quiet.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll just speak a little louder. Give me 1 minute here, and I will get it going. All right, can you folks see that?
Yes.
Great, and can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, pardon me. So, yeah, exactly that. We want to go through today, kind of let you folks know where you're at today, which is in a great place, and where we want to get you to when you're ready and if you want to. And I think we all do. So really what we've done, this slide is kind of a slide we go into actually when we're usually presenting for the first time when customers aren't on the ESInet. But I'd like to review it anyway to kind of go through and point out what we've already done and what's available to do. So we have you folks on the Lumen A901 system. We've set that foundation. So all of the interconnectivity of all the next generation core components are in there. In today's infrastructure, and I'll go into this in a little more detail in the next slide, but in today's infrastructure, getting those calls in, they are being converted to IP, but for today, we're still using what we call tabular ESN routing. So when a call comes in, we query our location database, which is kind of formally known as ALI. We have an ESN associated to that. We then send it to the appropriate PSAP through the IP network to that PSAP. Now, you have a lot more feature functionality, a lot more redundancy and diversity within the solution itself, but it's still making the routing decisions based on tabular data, on MSAG and ESN data. What we want to do is, since we've done the hard part, or one of the big hard parts, which is take out that foundation, replace that infrastructure with an IP infrastructure and next generation technology and all those features and functions. Now it's more moving to turn those applications on. The hard part for getting that connectivity is done because now it's application changes. So in order to do that, I'm going to go on to our next slide here. There we go. Is work with the GIS authorities and the PSAPs within the state of Colorado to figure out where we are with our GIS, because that's the big step for i3. And I can talk towards a couple of things. For that perspective, GIS routing, we need to get that GIS data from the local GIS authority. We need to make sure it's good, which means NINA has a recommendation of a 98% match rate between the GIS truth center line and the address point information and the existing MSAG. So that's their recommendation. We giggle a little bit at the 98% rate as to why they chose that rate. What we do and what the goal is to get it as close to or at 100% the day that we migrate over. So there are features and services that I'll talk about throughout that we can help the PSAPs and GIS authorities with that. or the GIS authorities and the PSAPs can kind of work on that solo and get it deployed in the infrastructure. It's all about how much help and we need to get it initially turned up, and then to basically service that throughout the life of that solution. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But where we were here is up top in this diagram. So that's the old legacy environment where we're talking about TDM trunks and SS7 going into a selective router and then sending that call via CAMA to the PSAP. Where we are now is the bottom left-hand portion of this, whereas we've established that IP infrastructure. It has all the connectivity to all those next generation core components and i3 core components. They're just not activated yet. And where we will be, and this is kind of it'll be ongoing and evolving, because where we will be there are a lot of outside dependencies there. For instance, in a true i3 end-to-end environment, will be required to, or the carriers themselves will be required to hook into the system i3, be able to manage their own location, send that in at the time of the call, or send a reference for that in at the time of the call so we can go grab it. Some carriers are getting closer and closer to this. And we'll continue to support those carriers. We're supporting carriers now in our infrastructure doing testing, but when they're ready to do it, we will support them. It's our job here as the next generation core services provider, for now, until those carriers can do it in the i3 fashion, to convert it in the proper way so we can, once we get that call in, we can do i3, we can do all the features and functions of i3 and get it to the PSAPs in i3. So we're doing that. We're capable of that now. We'll continue to work with the originating service providers to support them once they have the capability to move forward. What this kind of shows here as well is where we are now. We can absolutely begin today, and we are in other areas of the country, supporting GIS routing. So as long as we get those operational procedures set up, as long as the PSAPs GIS authorities have good, boundary layers and street centerline and address point data, we can get that up and running. We have the capabilities in our system today. Again, we're supporting this in other areas of Lumen to be able to receive that GIS information, to process it, check for errors, and load that into our system. So all those i3 capabilities are in our system today. We just want to work with the state of Colorado to figure out the path best for them to activate it. This is, again, just a picture, and again, we get to check a lot of these things off because we're already deployed in Colorado. So, do we do legacy support? Yes, we do today. So for those, there's still some PSAPs out there that are doing CAMA, for instance. So we support getting in the call, either legacy from a originating service provider, converting that to IP and i3 when we do go there. But we also support handing it off to PSAPs in the legacy fashion and CAMA fashion. But we also support handing it off to neighboring ILECs. For instance, if we had an area in Utah or New Mexico or Nebraska, although Nebraska is going next gen, if they were legacy, we have the capability in today's infrastructure to convert it from next gen and i3 back to legacy so we can hand it off to them. The IP network is set up and running today. That's a big piece and portion of moving to i3. Again, we're already on next gen. We already have that IP network set up. We're already sending voice and data over the IP network to the PSAP, so that one we can check off. Geographic tools and data. So these are things that as a PSAP moves forward to i3, we talk about a lot of tools and a lot of operational procedures that PSAPs and GIS authorities will need to activate in order to support this ongoing. Again, a couple different discussion points there is we have PSAPs across the country that have decided, we have those services and we have those relationship and operational procedures already in place that we're going to manage that. So, if we have a change of address, we'll manage that on our location MSAG side of the house, and we'll also manage that on the GIS side of the house. We'll talk to each other, and when we make a change on GIS, our MSEG coordinator will make a change on their side and everything is good to go. We do have additional services that makes that transition a lot easier. Whereas, one of the services that we offer is once we get it up and going, and we have our match rate where we need it to go, we have a service that allows for all the changes to come through the GIS side of the house. So any address point changes or street range changes or anything having to do with addressing can now be generated just from the GIS side of the house. And we have internal tools that then allows that to flow down to the location database side of the house, the MSEG side of the house. So it's in essence a one-stop shop through the GIS side of the house. So we've had customers go either way, either manage both sides on their side or go with us for a specific service that allows them just to manage it on the GIS side of the house. As a reminder here, in that end vision of full I3, we won't have an MSEG anymore because all of the originating service providers will manage their own location data and will send it in or send a reference to it at the time of the call. But until all of those carriers are up and running, which probably will be a while to be honest, we still need to manage the MSEG because we still have carriers sending in these address records to be loaded into a location database. So that's why we're in this, where we have to continue to manage an MSAG as well as the GIS side, because now the next generation solutions, because they're in transition, require both. Does that make sense to everybody? I hope so. If not, ask some questions. Again, so going along that line is we'll have new data validation and publication. I'll show you a couple screenshots here. We have that available through our systems today. In the NENA world, that's called a spatial interface. So the GIS authorities on the PSAP side will continue to maintain and update their information through this spatial interface, which is a web portal. It's dual factor authentication. I'll walk you through one or two screens of it, but it's accessible through the public internet, and that's where all of the layers and street center lines, address points are uploaded through into the system. Obviously, we need VoIP and enhanced routing. VoIP, voice over IP, is used throughout this system. As soon as that call comes into our main core, if it's coming in through the old analog TDM technology, we convert that to IP and voice over IP. So that's happening in today's infrastructure. And also reporting tools, management tools, that's all part of this solution as well. And I think the last time we went through some of that, we talked about our customer management portal, which gives you real-time view access into CDR data, our standard reports. I think you continue to work on ECATs to enhance some of their reporting. So all of that is part of really giving the customer, giving you folks more visibility into the infrastructure itself. I'm going to go look. I'm going to stop for a second and look to see if there are any questions. Okay, no questions yet, so I'm going to continue. Can you still see the Colorado A911 overview of services there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to toggle back between screens. So again, this is very high level. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I learned a long time ago, unless you would like me to. I find a lot of this stuff very, very interesting with the redundancy and reliability. But sometimes it glazes over on your side. Unless you're specifically interested in it, I can talk about all of the redundancy and diversity in our system. What I do want to talk about again is our kind of the different piece parts to this. So in today's infrastructure, we do have ESInet to ESInet connectivity. Once, whether that's on our Lumen system or on somebody else's system, for example, Utah is part of that. Utah system in turnup will get connectivity between our two systems to be able to transfer calls over to their ESInet. The OSP IP ingress, we're trying to drive this hard now. We still have a lot of originating service providers, telephone service providers connecting to legacy selected routers or connecting via old analog TDM, SS7 type of technology. We are pushing hard to get them coming into us IP. And what we've done in a couple of different ways is, even if they can't do I3, which is a major change on the telephone service provider side of the equation, which means they have to start managing their own address data. They also have to send all that in with new protocols and specifications. We've created an interim step called basic SIP, basic IP, which allows them just to send in voice IP, and then we do all the same feature functionality that we do to grab their location information and steer to them to get their wireless or VoIP information. So that's still available. We're pushing hard for those OSPs. It really makes a lot of sense on both sides of the equation. It's a better solution, better resiliency, redundancy. So we're continuing to offer that up to the telephone service providers. It is NENA compliant. We do what we do when we do turn up a PSEP to I3 or GIS routing is we take that GIS information, those street center lines and address points, and we use that to geocode any new records coming into the system. So if you think about that, as once we get it level set and turn this live, if we have a change from Lumen, let's say wireline or CLEC, and it comes and processes through our tables, we then associate a latitude and longitude from it that we acquired from the PSAPs and the GIS authorities, street center line and address point information. So we use that XY to plot within the appropriate boundaries and figure out which PSAP it should go to. So it's a good system. We're using the PSAP and local GIS authorities to do that geocoding, to associate that XY. Additionally, kind of a nice little benefit of our system, that is, if there is ever a problem with that XY, which there shouldn't be, we always have that tabular ESN as a backup alternate route. In case we have an issue with the latitude and longitude, we can always fall back to the ESN because we continue to manage that MSAG on our side of the house. We've set up all the interoperability. You folks know this. We've already done it in most of Colorado. So we do it with either CAMA, which I think we have 20 some odd PSEPs still up on CAMA. We do the majority of Colorado is on what we call transitional, which is IP voice, but still pulling kind of legacy alley there. And I3 is available here. So we're excited to move forward. There are some discussions we can have that if a PSEP's, there are some operational concerns and technical concerns on the PSEP side, is if that CPE can't support I3 at this time, we can still do GIS routing, which is really cool. We've been doing this so long, and we used to just do it in early adopter areas, and those early adopter PSEPs wanted a whole bunch of different functionality, but we still had to, transfer to PSEPs that didn't have that feature functionality. So we're able to configure around specific PSEPs capabilities. And one of those configurations is, well, the PSEP, for whatever reason, whether it's technical or operational, doesn't want to get I3 calls into them today. We can still do routing based on the GIS information and then hand off the call in that kind of legacy fashion. So that's something to think about. It's still out there, that if maybe the CPE equipment isn't ready or something of that nature, the operational procedures to manage I3 aren't ready, we can still do GIS routing, which gets us a big bang for our buck, but deliver it with ESNs and in the legacy fashion. Other things I think I've talked about multiple times here is we have dual pass to each core. It's 5 nines available and secure. We secure all of our links going out to the PSAP with 256 AES encryption. We have configurations on our routers there and access control lists to make sure that we're only processing the traffic that we're originating and that's destined for that PSAP. So this is to go back maybe. So yes.
Yeah, maybe we ought to pause here. That was covering a lot of ground, particularly with all the different varied kinds of CPE we have. Does anybody have any questions on what Rich was just covering here for CPE state of readiness for getting to I3 if you're not SIP today? I think most of these people on the call today here are SIP. So.
Okay, and again, if that's something we'll need to check with your vendors. Multiple vendors can do full i3 today. Vesta and Viper being the two top ones. You want to check with your vendors to verify that you're on the proper code release. Whatever costs surrounding that from your vendors to upgrade if you need to, or to provision if you need to. But Vesta and Viper, we have a whole bunch deployed across the country using those platforms, and it's going very, very well. Viper's been, I think, deployed since 2018, and I think Vesta was 2019 or early 2020. So they have many, many months under their belts, and it's going very well.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Rich. I just wanted to pause there, and this next slide's key. So go ahead if nobody else has any questions.
Sure. So this is when we move into GIS routing. Again, I've hinted towards this a couple of times. We still have to manage both sides of the equation. Again, because these telephone service providers are not i3 yet, it'll make everybody's life a little bit easier once they all go i3. But until all of them go i3, we're going to have to continue to manage originating service providers, telephone service providers, and their records coming in the legacy fashion. So all of the telephone service providers still send in SOI files, send in address files into the system to be validated against the MSEG. Make sure it's still good. So we still have to process those records. We still have to load them. We have it as ALI. The i3 term is more of a list or a location database. But in essence, in today's environment, i3, we still have to process those records, and we still have to load them into a location database, and we associate the latitude and longitude with that because we have that information from the GIS side of the house. But also in combination with continuing to manage the MSEG, we also have to manage the GIS information. That doesn't usually come from the same side of the locality's house that the MSEG does. So that is fed through a different interface, through our spatial interface. All the checks and balances are done on that, and those layers and those street center lines and address points are loaded into our database. But what happens when the MSEG side makes a change or the GIS authority side makes a change? Those still need to be kept in sync. So the NINA kind of view of that in this transitional state that we're in is that the operational procedures between those two different groups, that they'll have operational procedures between the two. So if the MSEG coordinator is the lead on it, they'll make a address range change, for instance. They'll send that to the GIS authority for that locality, and both of them will load it on both sides, and they'll be 100% in sync. We know through experience that sync up and that those operational procedures are sometimes difficult for the PSAPs, for the localities to manage. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. What we talk about with our TDMS service, which stands for Transitional Data Management Solution, is we try to make that a lot easier. So what we do with this service is first, before this go live and maintaining it, we have to get all of our data in order. And part of that I alluded to earlier was the NINA recommendation of getting up to a 90% match rate between the existing legacy data and the GIS data. Again, we want to get that up to 100%, and then maintaining that throughout the life cycle of the solution. So what this service does is, one, it helps with that onboarding, that first piece. So the Lumen and Trado analysts will help get the initial data, will help the GIS authorities and the MSEG authorities do the initial comparison. We'll work the error fallout for you to say, okay, well, initially you're at a 90% match rate, there's 10% fallout. Let's work together to figure out where these other 10% go. Which side of the house is right, in essence? Is it the MSEG correct, or is it missing data on the GIS authority side? So we work typically it's a couple of months, 3 to 6 months, I would say, as we work through that onboarding process to get that data up to 100%. Once we get it to 100%, what we do is we wipe clean your existing MSAG, and then we create a brand new MSAG from the GIS information that is now 100% accurate, and we call that a GeoMSAG. So we have a brand new MSAG, 100% match rate, no errors. That's where we start off from scratch. So day one, we have 100% match rate. Now again, kind of in other areas where this service, where the PSAP and GIS authorities have decided to manage it themselves, that's a tough part. We start out at 100%, and that's where we have the chance for it to start to diverge, right? So if those operational procedures and processes aren't in place, or there's some lag or something like that, you can start getting out of sync between your GIS information and your MSAG information. What this TDMS service does is activate some features and functionalities, include some additional resources on the Lumen and the Intrado side. And what we do then is we accept all of the changes from the GIS side. So the GIS is responsible for updating the changes, and then we carry any of those insert changes, deletes through to the MSAG side of the house automatically. So we work all that, and everything gets automatically updated and gets kept 100% in sync. Now, that's not saying that there's not going to be any problem. So if the GIS information, let's say, makes a street change that reduces a range from 1 to 100 to 1 to 50, and that orphans some records, first of all, we never take those records out of our system. We never allow for live numbers to be taken out of the system. But it would generate errors on our side, and we would use our tools to reach out to whoever that PSAP designates to say, hey, a change was made. It's going to negatively affect these address records. How would you like us to proceed? And we can set that conversation up with the GIS authority. We can set up those tools and that communication up to the MSAG coordinator, or we can set it up for both. So we have new applications that are very similar to kind of the old 911 application that allows for those conversations to occur and resolution to occur, through these applications. I'll stop there before I go into one of these applications. Are there any questions there? Does it make sense of what we're trying to do and offer a service to kind of reduce those operational issues, not only the operational issues, but the onboarding itself?
Yeah, Rich and Daryl, we've done this. It's kind of a two-step process, really, when you look at level setting I think the state of Colorado to get people up on board, and perhaps I would submit a more uniform fashion would be to maybe consider this TDMS to get that certain level setting of that GIS standard from all counties across the state. We've done that in other states, Rich, South Dakota, we're doing it in Nebraska, North Dakota, and it's really has sped up the process of getting their GIS up to speed in those different states. But of course, once you do the TDMS, you're not obligated to continue down that path. You can always take that base level and then go to GeoCom or look at different choices of what you might want to do on an ongoing GIS management basis.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really two kind of, and I'll clarify a little bit more. There's really two pieces to that TDMS service. One is the onboarding portion of it, and that's working with the different authorities and MSAG coordinators to get the data ready to go day one, to get it as close to 100% match rate as possible, and to create that, what we call a GeoMSAG. That's one piece. Then it's an ongoing service after that. So, we can piece part that together if necessary. If you just want to do the onboarding piece and then work to operationally manage the ongoing changes yourself, that's absolutely an option. But the service end to end is let's get it ready and then let's support it throughout the life of the service. But we can kind of do piece parts of that as well.
Thank you, Rich. I have questions about how we get this out to the 911 authorities, but I think I'll save those questions to the end if you want to continue.
Sure. This is a relatively new application on our side. What we did with GIS Director is we kept this next generation and GIS routing service in mind when we developed it. It really is kind of a combination of both 911 net, how we manage our MSAG, alley discrepancies, all the things that 911 net does today, as well as including the GIS side of the equation in there. So we're able to look at any errors, any tabular data that we have loaded to our location database, our alley side of the house, MSAG side of the house, which is the 911 net portion, which is on kind of the left-hand side here. And then we also incorporate all the GIS elements. So this incorporates, all the street center line data, all the address point, and actually will display a map acquired from the GIS authorities in the individual localities. We also have the ability to do address searches on both the MSAG tabular side and the GIS side. So if you want to do a data validation to see, will this MSAG address fall or process on the GIS side, those tools are in there as well. So if the TDMS services, ongoing services are chosen by the locality, this application comes with it. We do training and all of that stuff. So this application, in essence, replaces 911 net. Has all the feature functionality of 911 net, but also added feature functionality to pull in that GIS component. And again, I've kind of talked towards most of this before, but it's more of a visual representation. That once the GIS data is ready in the ongoing service, the GIS updates would come into the spatial interface of the Intrado GIS services. It would process, it would do all of its quality control checks, all of its QA, QCs, assuming there aren't any issues with the data, any street center line issues or gaps or overlaps or anything like that. It would then process and go into the ECRF, into that next generation core component that's in charge of determining the routing for a call. Additionally, it then travels, those changes, updates go through to the MSAG, the legacy side of the system, the location database side of the system, and make any changes that are necessary there. If there is an issue where like abandons records or something like that, then we work with that new application that I showed on the previous slide, the GIS Director, with whoever the PSAP designates. We should work those errors with to get it back up and running and get it back into shape. If that requires a new GIS update, then a new GIS update will be generated and sent through the system so everything gets back in sync. So it's just additional checks and balances to make sure all of that data is kept in sync. It's a one-stop shop to allow all those changes to occur through one source rather than having to coordinate multiple sources on the locality side to make sure everything stays in line with each other. So that's pretty much it. I think Wes was going to talk towards this slide, but if we want to go back to your questions, we can address some of those if you'd like.
I don't see any hands up. I think my questions really have to do more with the pricing and potential tariff updates that need to happen for the optional TDMS service to be available to everybody. So it sounds like that's something that Wes is maybe going to cover.
I think so. Yeah, that's usually pricing comes from Wes.
Right. Tim and I, we're not quite done with that. That has to be, it's still being worked under internally here, Daryl and team. We're not quite ready to do that. We're trying to be get that as compressed as possible for the benefit of the whole state. So I trust that by this time next month, on our next meeting, we'll have some concrete answers. Or if it's there before, Daryl will certainly get that out sooner. But we're not quite ready to discuss that yet. There is a cost to that, and of course we want to be uniform in getting that data level set in as fair a fashion as possible.
Jerry has a question. He says, does the product offer any APIs, and is there any documentation to clarify any APIs that are available for the customer to use?
Sure. Yes, there's a heck of a lot of documentation. We'll get that over. There's really two ways to get the information into the system today, and that documentation will go through that. One is using this web portal interface where you would, dual factor authentication, click on it, you then go, and I can demo this if we ever need to see it. But you go into the GIS upload screen itself. The GIS authority will then determine which layers they want to update. So you can update police, fire, EMS. You can update street center line address point data. There's a whole bunch of different options there. You can update all of them or just one of those attributes. So that's all available. Then there's another screen to go in through is see how those records process, any errors or statistics of that initial load. We also have, and had over the last year or so, had a lot of questions about, is there a way to automate that rather than having to have a person go on there and automatically, manually kind of browse their own computer to pull out the layers and data to upload that information. We do have something we called Move It, which is a secure FTP way to do it. So if the PSAP side or GIS authority, typically they're pretty tech savvy, they can do a secure FTP to a location on our side and automate that versus having to go on and manually do that. I can get information for both of those services there.
Thank you. And for Wes, I know, Wes, one of the things, because we've talked about the addition of ECATs onto the service. We've talked about the addition of text to 911 onto the ESInet service. I don't know. I know you're still researching pricing on both of those items, and both of those would almost necessarily require a tariff change. Do you think it's possible that these items could be bundled together and made in one change to the tariff so that CenturyLink isn't having to come back and make changes to the tariff and the tariff pricing every few months?
Well, that's a great question. And yeah, that'd be great if we could facilitate it and one fell sweep there. Of course, as long as there's the concurrence that everybody wants these three items. I think the ECATs and the TDMS are uniformly more easily assimilated to the ESInet offering to a tariff. We have found on the texting part, though, Daryl, there is some things we've got to work through, and because it's going to work differently if you're SIP or if you're camera to get that text incorporated. So we're working with Intrado. Rich and I were speaking about that earlier. And that's another internal thing that we're going to have to work through. But I don't know if Tim's on the phone. I can't see it from my screen. I'm visiting a PSAP out here, and I don't see if Tim Kunkelman is on the line to answer that question.
I do see Tim.
Okay. Tim, is that...
I am on, but I don't know that I have an answer for that question right now. I think we need to look at other things.
And if text to 911 is going to take longer, maybe what could be looked at would be making one change to the tariff and the tariff pricing to account for ECATs and the TDMS product, and then maybe work on text to 911 after that, if that's going to take longer, because it sounds like that's a little bit more complicated.
We'll know shortly. So I commit to you, Daryl, that we're going to rapidly work through these issues and get those all presented to the team here to just see what is possible and get the pricing nailed down as well.
Sounds good. Patty had a question. She says, does Intrado envision the PSAP working with the same individual from Intrado during the QA process? In other words, assigned to the same person to maintain consistency, et cetera?
Yeah, so it would be, I mean, as compared to today, and maybe we can get some clarity. The person that is worked with from Intrado today is usually our DIU analyst, So they focus on the location database side, the MSEG database side. What the resource that will be for TDMS will be a GIS resource. Now, will that be the same person from the onboarding process to get all the data into shape to going forward for any additional GIS questions? Yes, but it's not the same person you're working with today, because the person today has expertise on kind of tabular data and MSEG information versus the GIS expert that we assign for the TDMS side of the service.
Thank you. And one thing I wanted to point out, I know, Rich, you touched on it quite a bit in your presentation, but I wanted to just kind of underline it, is that to be truly NINA i3, that requires the NINA i3 solution to be all the way from the caller all the way to the call taker. And really the only thing we have control over through the tariff process is this middle section. Mm-hmm. We cannot predict right now when the originating service providers are going to be able to start providing calls in SIP format with PITA-flow location information attached to it. And I hope that as PSAPs upgrade their CPE, they're making sure that the CPE that they're purchasing is capable of receiving calls in native i3 format. But that's really up to the PSAPs, because we don't have the authority to control that. So it's going to be some time, and it's really hard to put a timeline on it as to when we're going to be a NINA i3 state. In fact, I don't know that there are really any states out there that are fully i3. Even California is probably the furthest along on this right now, and they've got some of their providers providing calls in SIP format, but it's still a work in progress.
So let me, if you don't mind me clarifying a little bit, Daryl, I think yes, I agree with you that if you look at the end state vision of NINA and what i3 is, it involves those telephone service providers, every one of them, sending in calls IP and managing PITA-flow and the new protocol. What we do on our side, though, from a Lumen Intrado perspective, is as soon as that call comes in, we convert everything to i3. So whether or not that, let's say it's a wireless carrier that's still sending it in, via SS7, we will take that, we will convert it, we will do our transitional location queries to their existing infrastructure and convert that. So from a PSAP perspective, if they're ready, they will do everything in an i3 fashion. Additionally, we're seeing more and more wireless carriers change out their kind of technical infrastructure a little bit, or make tweaks to it to be able to provide better, faster phase 2 information. And I think, without giving anything away, in the next 6 to 12 months, you'll see at least a couple of major carriers, even though they're not going to i3, having the capability to provide location information at the time of the call. I've been doing some testing with one carrier, and it's been, one of these carriers in particular went somewhere between 3%, where they were, could get that information quick enough for us to use it for location routes, to 50%. So there are going to be some big changes on that telephone service provider side of the house that allows us to get that location information faster, do GIS routing on wireless calls, and get them there and send them there in an i3 fashion. From a PSAP perspective, it'll act 100% like i3, because we do that negotiation between all the old legacy technologies and converting it to i3. Makes sense?
Very good. Got a couple more comments that came in. Matt Gage says addressing coordination would still be needed.
Yeah.
Patty clarifies her question. She says, I wasn't clear enough. It sounds like every time you do a QA process, you could get a different Intrado employee. Is that correct?
No, so I'll address both of those. From Matt's question, I agree with you, Matt. What we hope, or what we know, because we've done this, is that the amount of coordination will be a lot less, at least from a Lumen Intrado perspective, because these records and these address changes would occur through the GIS side and automatically update on the MSEG. Now, for those that, the scenarios that I went through where maybe you get an orphaned record or something like that. Yes, absolutely. We'll still want a representative to talk to work through those issues. But it could be the MSAG representative, or it could be a GIS representative, or it could be both. There's still going to be some procedures need to be put in place there of how to validate, issues that we do run into, although they'll be significantly less. From Patty's question, and I apologize, the QA/QC process for GIS and the representative, the GIS representative that they work with, will stay consistent throughout that service.
Very good. Any other questions for Rich? Well, Rich, this has been very helpful. I did notice your slides say confidential and proprietary on them. Is it okay if I share this with the group? And we also usually post videos of our calls.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I think moving on, Cindy, are you still on the line?
I am.
Great. I'm going to share my screen again so we can go through our current status. And I noticed that we still have some PSAPs that have ALI migration pending on the status spreadsheet.
Just Fremont, and I need to touch base with Converged One.
Okay.
On Fremont.
So it still says ALI migration pending on the Douglas County PSAPs. Are those migrated now?
Yeah, Douglas migrated. Sorry, I just need to remove that note.
No problem. And yesterday afternoon, Rangeley PD got migrated.
Yay!
It says issue with KP48 test, so there's still some testing that needs to be done there.
No, that was the issue we resolved yesterday that allowed us to go ahead and migrate the site.
Okay. Before we get to the other PSAPs at the bottom of this list, are there any others that still have items pending that you would like to go over?
Yeah.
Okay. And so the PSAPs we have left, we've got Shriver Air Force Base, Buckley Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station, and then we have the two new, these are existing call centers that are not PSAPs that are becoming PSAPs, CSP Denver and CSP Pueblo. And then Adams County is adding a backup as well.
Yeah.
Any issues that we need to be aware of on any of these? And what's the status of the Air Force bases?
The Air Force bases are completing their site readiness, power, and rack availability. I believe it's Cheyenne Mountain requested a custom rack size. So we've placed that order with Entrado for that rack.
Okay.
Waiting for that and for them to confirm site readiness as far as power and clearing out space for the racks.
Okay. Is there
Buckley is installed, but we have a KP8 issue there that the site is working on with their vendor.
Good.
And so we just need to get back in touch with them to find out when they're going to be ready for us to come back out.
Okay. Is there anyone from Adams County on the line? Adams County? Cindy, I've reached out to Adams County to let them know that if they want to get reimbursed for the additional concurrent sessions, because I think they're installing 8, is that right?
Yeah.
If they want to be reimbursed through the grant for that, they need to get me a quote, and I have not seen that yet. So I don't know if that's something you would mind mentioning to them.
Okay.
I did reach out to them, but I still haven't seen anything from them yet. I just want to make sure because we do have a little bit of room left in the grant to pay for those.
Okay. We'll follow up and make sure they know that because that one should be about ready. The PSAP was built on the Lumen systems, and we sent the request in about 2 weeks ago on the Entrado side to have it built and established. So all we'll need to do is install the second pad at Weld County. And we'll probably be ready to test this one this month.
Okay, great.
And then the 2 state patrols will be installed the end of this month. the 30th and 31st.
Oh, very good.
And then our open issues are really I've left the spam calls on. I think they've dropped off quite a bit, but just as a point of discussion with everyone. And then Vail transfer, it sounds like they're still, even after the new call handling upgrade, still having issues with transfer.
And that's a very intermittent problem, correct? It's not something that's happening.
Yes,
every
but it
time you
appears to be related to their Avaya phone system. So like Aspen isn't reporting on the exact same system, isn't reporting any issues. And everything we've looked at with our techs, and we've got the techs looking at it again, we can't find anything on our network or the ESInet related to this.
Okay. Anyone from Vail PD on with any comments? I'm not hearing anything.
Hey, Daryl, this is Jerry from Summit. I would it be possible to add us with the transfer issues as well? I don't know why we keep getting off the list.
You're still on. I just didn't show that one, but I'll
Okay.
go back and. So you're still having
Yeah,
just to the 10-digit numbers?
that's correct. Yeah. And I apologize. I have a conflict with this meeting, and so I can't make every single meeting, but it seems like every other meeting that I show up, we're just off the list.
You're on my master list. I just didn't have it as an active issue, but I will update that note.
All right, cool. Thank you.
The EXFO probe replacement project. What's that about?
It's those monitoring probes at your sites. We switched models about halfway through the project. So the first sites that were deployed will need to go back and replace with the new model. But I need to get a shipment of those in, and they're somewhat delayed due to some manufacturing shortages around chips and such that are going on right now.
Understood. Another item that's not on this list that I've been keeping kind of in my own mental list is interstate transfers. So the ability to transfer calls to or from agencies on the other side of the border, Kansas or Utah or New Mexico or Wyoming. And I just want to make sure that doesn't fall off the list as well. And I think as we're getting close to the end of the migration project, we need to start looking to that because that's functionality that some of the bordering PSAPs have lost.
Yeah, we had that as on hold pending completion of the migration. But Wes, I know you've been having conversations with everyone around it. I don't know if Wes is still on. But we do have 911 transfer capability across state lines on.
I think Wes dropped off, yeah.
We should still be able to transfer to 10-digit numbers. Obviously, we don't have star codes across state lines. But a 10-digit transfer across state lines would still work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of keeping it in. I think the preference is to keep it in like an ESInet network.
Well, whether it's
ESInet
or not, I think for wireless calls, if a wireless caller crosses the state border, you want to be able to transfer that call with the annually so that they're getting the caller's lat long.
Right. Yeah, and the call can be transferred. I think it's the annually that's the problem right now.
Okay. Any questions for Cindy on the project status tracker or issue tracker? Okay, not hearing anything. We already talked a little bit about ECATs and text to 911. I want to let everyone know that Kimberly and I had a conversation with CenturyLink and Intrado and an ECATs representative. ECATs is part of Intrado now. and they were able to provide some pricing, but the pricing is per PSAP. What we'd really like to do is see that pricing per concurrent session so it can be reimbursed through the state 911 surcharge. But I just want to let you know those conversations have been ongoing. And we heard from Wes today about the internal conversations they're having regarding text to 911. And then we can add TDMS probably to this list of next steps for the ESInet. Another item regarding next steps, I did send out or let everyone know that we're working on a state next generation 911 strategic plan. I plan on holding workshops to help build that plan. I'm going to be doing them probably after we have the workshop on 911 network reliability later this month. I don't want to overwhelm people with so many different workshops that they can't attend all of them at once. So we'll do one workshop at a time. So we'll do the 911 network reliability workshop, and then I'll schedule a workshop to talk about the next gen 911 strategic plan. But I wanted to let everyone know that hasn't fallen off the radar. I do want to get some document together that we can use as a 911 community to kind of help guide our future steps, and we can use as sort of a roadmap to see where we are. And I think the conversation we had today with Intrado with their presentation will be very informative to that process as well. We already had our presentation, open discussion. So any questions or concerns from the PSAPs to CenturyLink? That's open discussion item A. Does anybody from the PSAPs have anything that they want to bring up at this point regarding the ESInet?
Hey, Daryl, it's Brad Flanagan.
Hi, Brett.
Hey, so do you want to explain a little bit of the stuff we were talking about with Vicky today? Because that kind of is bringing up some questions.
Are you talking about the call overflow?
Yeah.
Sure. So I was gonna talk about that, but we've been having some conversations so Pitkin County and I have been having some conversations with Vicky Hyatt with Intrado about call overflow and what happens to a call if it overflows from one facility. Where does it go? And it sounds like there's some customization that can be done with the 911 from the 911 authority side, telling CenturyLink or Lumen or Intrado where they want those calls to go when they overflow from the 911 center. In some cases, they might just be overflowing to a 10-digit line at the same center, which may or may not be helpful. So we probably want to talk about what our options are on that and see if there's a process that we can put together going forward to help set that up so that every 911 center knows where their calls are going to go if they overflow from their facility. So I'm going to be having a call with Vicky separately to talk about what those options are and what would be needed from the 911 centers to make sure that those overflow rules are in place and are clear to the 911 center so they know what to expect if that happens.
Well, one more piece on that, Daryl. If you could get like a diagram for all the centers so that we know where everything's flowing and what direction it's going, if we have one full set for the state, that would be awfully nice.
Yes, Brett, I agree. And I think that, CenturyLink files an annual 911 contingency plan that includes all of the condition 4 routing numbers, all of the the different types of outages that can happen and what CenturyLink does in those situations if there's something that can be done, depending on the type of outage it is. But I think having that layer, if we can put it in a diagram, that's great. If not, if some sort of tabular representation of those call overflow situations, if we could have that as part of that report, I think that'd be a terrific addition. But that's not due until next year. So in the meantime, I think we can work on building something that can be made available to the 911 center so that they can all look, a 911 center that wants to can look it up and see what their call overflow automated approach is from CenturyLink and from Intrado. So I'll be working on that with Intrado. Any other comments from the PSAPs or 911 authorities? Okay, CenturyLink, do you have anything that you'd like to talk to the PSAPs about or need to let the PSAPs know about? Okay, not hearing anything. We're to the public comment section. So any non-members, we try to keep because the meeting does have quite a few people on it usually, we try to keep the meeting to voting members discussion. But if there are any non-voting members who have anything that they'd like to bring up, now would be the time. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'll give you back another almost half an hour of your day. Take care, and we will see you all in a month.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody.